Hey guys, watching my videos throughout the years, you've probably noticed I have some pretty diverse tastes in hip hop. I mean, probably too diverse for most of you guys, because I really like just about, you know, every era, every style, every subgenre. I mean, not necessarily like every artist or every record from those eras and styles and subgenres, but definitely at least some of them within just about every single category. But in the 90s, if you had to put me in one, if you had to really kind of fence me in, I was probably sort of mostly in kind of the backpacker mobs. But still, big fan of the hardcore stuff, the gangsta stuff, and all that. So I could totally also at the same time appreciate the movement that this did and kind of push it out of the forefront by the end of the 90s. So I was pretty into the anti-backpacker movement here in 2002. Now, this came out on True Criminal Records, and True Criminal Records, you could say, like me, started largely in sort of the backpackery camp. It was definitely indie New York, indie vinyl kind of stuff. If you saw my video on Street Smartz and Answer Record Week, quintessential True Criminal stuff, but they had guys like Ox Skills, who's probably more backpackery, Godsons. If they weren't backpackery, they're at least riding the line. So just a few years later, to have your ethos to be anti-backpacker is a bit of a shift, but then again, it's also a bit not of a shift. Still at the forefront of their label is Street Smarts. At this point, he's given up the name Street Smarts. It's just going by the solo name FT. But he's still sort of their flagship artist. He had several solo 12 inches out, and a lot of the other records that they were putting out on the label were sort of guys who were like passing through, like Tragedy, like he put out a single on the label, but he definitely wasn't signed to True Criminal. He was just on there because he was on the compilation, which I'm going to talk about. Because Anti-Backpacker was basically their big signature compilation. I mean, they did have this years earlier, and this is really dope. It's a nice little EP, features an exclusive remix of Metal Things, plus again artists, Street Smarts, Ox Skills, Godsons, exclusive songs by all of them. So a dope, nice little EP. This was again in the 90s. The label was really coming hard back then. They're just pushing out a lot of stuff, like 96, 97, and then they pretty much slowed down. They didn't really stop or anything, but like by the bridge between 1999 to 2001, I think they had one 12-inch. It was just one FT solo 12-inch. So it really sort of seemed like, okay, the backpacker age is kind of ending. The New York independent label kind of stuff is closing up. Now we're getting to the digital stuff. It just sort of seemed like, okay, maybe that door was closing. But actually, True Criminal was coming back for one more big push. Again, the anti-backpacker movement. Now, again, you say, okay, this is just a 3-song EP. But this is basically the lead signature single off of what was a full-length album, which was mostly CD only. I think there is a promo LP or double LP out there. I don't have it, but I think there is one of the full album. But basically, it was a CD-only album. And again, it's largely FT is a signature artist. He's the big guy they're pushing. They had a 151 Proof was also their artist. And basically everybody else were artists who were just passing through. You had Tragedy, who I mentioned before. You had Smooth and Trigger. You had, well, probably bigger than anyone, 50 Cent, who is on this EP. One of these songs right here, 50 Cent, featuring G-Unit, which actually, if you break it down, though, is really just sort of more a G-Unit song altogether. But I'm going to come back to that. Now, why or even how did True Criminal kind of come back with this big push? I think it's because what you'll notice here, if you pay, you probably can't see it in the video, but if you look really close at the label, besides True Criminal, this is also credited to New Line Records. New Line Records, as in New Line Cinema, the movie line, famous for doing like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, New Line movies, New Line Pictures. Well, they were also doing the Friday movies, as in, Ice Cube, Pooh, and Chris Tucker, those movies. And around this time, they were doing the soundtrack to Friday 2 or 3, I don't even know at this point, but one of the soundtracks. And they had 50 Cent on it, they had FT on it. They were basically working with True Criminal Records. That's why they have collaboration on here. These songs, which originate here and on the full-length version of Anti-Backpacker Movement, did also wind up, not all of them, but at least the G-Unit song, wind up on the soundtrack to, again, Friday 2 or 3. I forget which one it is. So I assume that's where all the money comes from. That's how they're getting everybody from Mike Geronimo to Nature and all these people just sort of on the label. Because again, True Criminal in 1997, it was just a really independent label with their own guys. Sometimes they would have someone like OC do a guest appearance or, guest production, but basically it was a really small label doing just some nice, solid, independent stuff that kind of blew up. Now, they definitely, I think, were spending a bigger budget. And you feel it here. This is a really killer EP. It starts off with what I believe is the best song, John F. Hennessy, which, okay, that's a bad pun, but fortunately it doesn't actually come up within the song itself, it's just the title, by FT. Again, he's not only sort of their signature flag artist of the label, the one guy that they're still promoting, because, like, whatever happened to Ox Skills, I don't know, they just kind of dropped him and Godsons and all that. FT's still around and still their strongest guy. and he kills it on this lyrically, and it's produced by The Alchemist, so really great combination there. And this is now 2002, so Alchemist, really good prime time for him. FT kills it, like he's sort of, like he's witty, but he's not too jokey or silly, like the punchlines aren't too punchliney, but then again, he's also very kind of smart and funny. So it really, and yet he's also hard, and it just, all the elements just really work together just perfectly. Like some of the other big artists, like the Tragedy song on the LP, which is not on the EP. That's a good song, but it's definitely not his strongest stuff. Like, all Tragedy songs are pretty much good. Like, Tragedy is always good. Any era, any style, you go back to the Intelligent Hoodlum and even, you know, the early Super Kids stuff to, you know, recent stuff he's just doing right now on YouTube. Like, he's always good. He's a really consistent artist. He's one of the most consistent artists in hip-hop. But this particular song on this album is like, you know, by Tragedy standards, it's just alright. It's kind of on the low end. It's fine, it's cool, but it doesn't really stand out. FT, I'd say, owns him completely. The G-Unit song, again, is credited to 50 Cent, featuring the G-Unit, but it's 3 verses. It's Lloyd Banks, it's Tony Yayo, and then finally 50 Cent, and his verse isn't any longer than anybody else. Usually if you hear like 50 Cent featuring G-Unit, you figure, okay, it's going to be like 3 verses by 50 Cent, and then maybe like kind of a final verse featuring a couple of the guys or something. You know, like if you hear Eazy-E featuring NWA, you say, oh, well, it's going to be We Want Easy, where Eazy-E is 90% of the song, and then Dre and Ren just have like a little tiny bit. But no, this one is really, 50 Cent is just one equivalent member with the others on the song here, which you're probably familiar with even if you don't have the CP, Bad News, because 50 Cent did wind up recycling it and putting it on like at least one, I think more than one of his mixtapes. Certainly it's all over online and everything. And again, it's also on the Friday sequel soundtrack. But I think a lot of heads don't even realize that it originates right here. This is sort of an interesting period for 50. He had already come out and blown up. You know, How to Rob was several years ago, because again, this is 2002, this is late era for True Criminal. So he had come out, he'd been on Columbia, he had a major label album, but he hadn't totally become the 50 Cent that we know today, but he had some big records, and then Columbia dropped him. And then so he's sort of floating around on independent labels, which is why I think he wound up on projects like here with True Criminal. And then eventually, after this, he got signed to Interscope and started doing the, you know, commercial pop records with Eminem and all that kind of stuff. And I think because of those records, it's easy for audiences now to really sort of be very dismissive of 50 Cent. Be like, oh, you know, he's corny, he's this, he's that, he's whatever. But this song right here is dope. This shows you that Eminem, this will remind you why, not Eminem, 50 Cent, this will remind you why 50 Cent, a credible artist, a serious MC with some nice verses, some solid production by his usual guy, Shaw Money. But interestingly, I wouldn't say that 50 Cent has the best verse on here. Lloyd Banks actually comes off pretty well, and Tony Yayo really kills it with the second verse, which is on some dark street Shook Ones kind of level. But all over, it's a really solid song. Production is nice. All 3 MCs are nice. It's a really solid song. Even if you put yourself in the camp of disliking 50 Cent and G-Unit, I think you'd sort of have to begrudgingly admit that this song is pretty dope. And then we come back to FT one more time. This song isn't quite as good as the first one. It's called Money All the Time, but it's still pretty solid. It's actually FT featuring the Mafia, and if you're like, who's the Mafia? It's actually the Junior Mafia. Although, when you actually boil it down and listen to the song, it's only Lil Cease. You know, you're never going to find Lil Kim or anything. They're not even doing backup voices or anything on this. So they probably should just have Lil Cease. But I think at this time, I guess I figured Junior Mafia's name was more known, but then they left off the Junior anyway. I don't know. I don't know why they credited it like that. But it's FT doing 2 verses. Lil Cease comes in the middle. It's produced by Buck Wild, so you know it's a pretty solid track. I think FT and the track are still a little stronger than the Alchemist song in the beginning. And Lil Cease is fine, he's good, but I don't miss him on John F. Hennessy. And I apologize if this video is very jumpy and edity and lots of cuts. Trains are just going nuts behind me, and I guess I could just leave it in the background, but it's really loud and obnoxious. But anyway, so what was I saying? This song's pretty solid, not as good as John F. Hennessy. Lil Cease is solid on here, but FT definitely beats him. So I don't miss him on John F. Hennessy, that's for sure. But it's another winner from FT, and probably the 3 strongest tracks from the EP. Maybe not quite the absolute 3 strongest, but 2 of the strongest, and another very excellent one. Really solid EP. You don't necessarily need the whole LP if you have this, but the whole LP is good. True Criminal was rocking again. They spent the money wisely, used their dope artists, and also brought in new artists. Not all the dope artists, again, who knows what happened to a lot of their old guys like Oxgills, but killed it. And this is really the final period, unfortunately, True Criminal, though. They did a couple other 12 inches, and that was basically it. They kind of went out with a bang, though. Anti-backpacker. You know, get that nerd shit out of here, bring in the raw street hardcore stuff, which really works, and True Criminal does it perfectly here. So I'm going to play some clips, and that's it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time. And no trains in the video, I hope. So FT with Alchemist, this one's a banger.
Yeah. Where I'm from, we don't live the hustle. We hustle to live. See, most people's first words was my, dada. My first words was fuck that. True criminal. When I die, I'ma come back and be a block. When niggas sell a bunch of crack and keep it hot. Now if you compare me to Dax, I'll be a Glock. And if rap was a wrestling match, I'll be the Rock. Man, picture F sober, girl, I'm a sex soldier. Still fucking with no promotion or exposure. We test toasters, pull out and just roast ya. I got money now, so I keep my tech closer. Hate on, hate up, cause I'm still in the game. It's killing your brain, making sure you feeling the pain. Willing to aim, 6 shots filling your frame. I'm doing well, I probably sell about $1 million and change. FTs with the shit that rearrange your career. You beating me is like the Neptunes, changing they fear, making it clear. Fuck that, blazing this here. Niggas wanna talk shit, so I'm taking it there. It's a very thin line between dogs and take, it's strong to take. That's why I'm on the stage, shoot and kill. I ain't got slugs to waste FT. The nigga that you love to hate. The nigga that you love to hate.
Alright, there's a good chance you've heard this one before, so I'm going to skip right to the Tony Yayo verse. This is G Unit, 50 Cent, Bad News.
Don't play that. Number one, pick a target, studying for weeks. See where they rest at and lay with their peaks. Now you got the drop, know their daily routine. So the second rule, please be the crime scene clean. Third rule, pick a day. Fourth rule, pick a time. Fifth rule, pick a fifth. Sixth rule, pick a 9. And the seventh rule, make sure your sidearm's sweet. So in the shootout, you leave them 6 feet deep. Eighth rule, meeting a fast car with disguise. Using ski masks with shades on your eyes. Ninth rule, don't say shit. Cause listen, fuck around, you end up being stuck in the system. In the 10th rule, don't put a tag on a broken heart. Just put a toe tag on your mark. And rule number 11, you for the body, but you're not a legend. You better watch when you headed. Look, I don't like you don't like me, it's not likely. We'll never be friends. Why the thing? Mom, get back at it again. I don't like you don't like me, it's not likely. We'll never be friends. Why the thing? Mom, get back at it again. Go ahead, go against me, I hurt your feelings. Don't come across the side of the earring. My confidence level is high, nigga can't tell. Look at my lips, at your bitch like I'm LA.
Finally, FT, Buck Wild, with one small part of Junior Mafia, but never going to hear him in this clip. This is Money All the Time. I'd probably like this song a little bit better with a better hook, but here we go.
FT shit, aka fuck that. Money all up, money all up, money all up, money all up, money all up. Bang zoom, nigga. Trees on you. I'm calling cases. How we do it? D-Rockefeller. BK niggas. Hey yo, I seen this dough in sight, all the freaks, far from a tipper. I'm a hustler, I take dough from a stripper, please hear me out. Before I cock this running back and hear shit out. You know that paper, the rule of all evil. Shit had you back down the burner on your peoples. When I'm dead broke, I flood the hook with diesel. Big bag of white of that lethal. Rubber band around the vein, hit it with the needle. Dog, try to get it. A G-R-double-E, it is when I'm spinning. Big hundreds, 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, 50s and hundreds. Spend them in a large abundance. Made none for rapping. Only thing that shit got me is squatting for the captain. Locked down in CFC with niggas who be rapping. Fake thug niggas who be ratting. Time to get this dough, let's make it happen. Money all the time. Money all the time. Money all the time.